I'd like to talk a little bit about my book called What to Do When You're Dead, which has recently been republished. It's a book about the afterlife and what the afterlife is like. Now, there's a number of ways I could approach this, because on the one level, there's belief systems. Religions and mythologies and other various cultures have all had different views about what the afterlife is like. So I've looked at some of those ideas first off and found many things that seem to correlate, where people's experiences seem to have been written up into religions and come from various similar standpoints. So I've looked for the similarities between different religions to say what the afterlife is like and what the process of dying is like and what continues after death. I've also looked at the scientific evidence for life after death and the proofs for life after death, such as near-death experiences and the various things that doctors have had to say of people that have been resuscitated after having been clinically brain dead. That gives us some very interesting standpoints and a new modern perspective, which we can compare in some respects to the religious ideas that have come from before. Similarly, we can talk about things like out-of-body experiences that people have had, experiences that people have had during deep meditation and yoga and things that they've told us about their experiences of the next world. We can talk about dreams where we've had proofs of people coming back through dreams and talking about the next life. And most importantly, from my perspective, being a medium myself, working with my wife Jane as a medium, I've looked at some of the evidence that's come through our own mediumship and of course the mediumship of other spiritualists. You know, it's always interested me that we give a message from in a theatre or in a spiritualist church or in a private reading or circles and so forth. And very often the spirit person will come back and say a number of things that seem to be quite consistent. Things such as that the next world is not a place of heaven and hell so much, but as one existence. That people are not necessarily punished in the way we might expect them to be punished from what we read in religions. But people are reformed perhaps and healed. So I've looked at these ideas because very often many of the things that mediums say, even though they've never met each other and even though they don't have a tradition that they're coming from, people that have come out of spiritualism and other people that have come from no-isms whatsoever, all seem to have similar communications from the spirit world that suggests that we can get some picture, by putting all this together, of what it is like to live in the afterlife. There's many interesting issues that come up because the afterlife is not very like this world. Time, for example, is described differently. The movement through time and space is described differently. For example, a person might use situations in the same way that we might use a dream to discuss something, as it were, within ourselves. A dream situation is created, or artificial reality, so that we can thresh out an emotional problem or deal with come to a solution to some issue that's troubling us or something we want to work out in ourselves. And spiritual issues and issues about life after death and so forth all come up in dreams in a sort of symbolic environment. And it seems that perhaps the next life is a bit like this, a little bit like a dream environment where people are together for a while. They might be in a familiar environment, like I'm at home at the moment, so I might, in the afterlife state, experience this same world that's around me now with the people I know from the next life and deal with my spiritual progress. So what I'm saying is that the afterlife appears to be a bit like a lucid dream of some sort. An artificial reality. The Matrix perhaps came close to the idea, the movie. So I've addressed some of these ideas in the book, but I've also looked perhaps a bit deeper than some, because we have to also ask, as spiritualists we say the personality survives death. But is there some... We first of all have to ask ourselves, well, what is the personality? And then people also talk about that it's a divine experience and a God experience, as they talk about after death. Well, I often might argue, for example, well, what do we mean by this concept of God? And do we actually have to have a God for there to be an afterlife? I mean, could the afterlife not be some continuation of a natural evolution of the human condition? That we survive first as a physical form, we create an energy body, that energy body creates consciousness, and within that energy body the consciousness moves on to another plane of existence, perhaps some multiverse of some sort. There might not be a need for a God in that world. So I argue the cases for and against the idea of there being a God, and if we think about a God, what do we mean by it? Rather than somebody that sits upon judgment upon us, and I've looked at ideas like Judgment Day and so forth, or is it something more about a state of absolute bliss, of absolute love, absolute totality of existence, like they talk about in the East? So, what is this personality that survives death? What is the afterlife itself like? And indeed, how does it relate with this world? I mean, is this world like the chrysalis and the butterfly flies from this world and never comes back again? Or is it more like the Eastern idea that we go perhaps into the next world for a while, into the lokas, into the bardos perhaps as the Buddhists call it, and then return back to this world to learn new lessons? So these are difficult sometimes things to square. Different belief systems that I believe have a fundamental core to them that seems to show a consistency of ideas. And I think this is what mediums give us. I think through the work of people like myself and all the other many mediums that are working today, we are beginning to get an understanding about what the next world is like that is perhaps not dependent so much upon belief, but upon personal experience. And my book, What to Do When You're Dead, is about some of my personal experiences and the experiences of other people that I hope will help us to answer some of these intriguing questions.